Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little, and today I want to share with you a program that I use to improve my skills and make sure I don't get too out of line. PokerSnowie. PokerSnowie is essentially an AI tool that has played infinite hands against itself and has figured out what it thinks to be a very strong, robust strategy. And you can test yourself against it. So what you do, after you download PokerSnowie, you can get your copy at jonathanlittle.com/PokerSnowie. Click on Training. It'll bring up this tab. Oh, there it is. How do we want to train? Freeze out, cash game, or custom? Let's just do a cash game because right now I really want to test myself on, let's say, 5-handed, 40 big blind poker. What do I want the ante to be? I want the ante to be 1 big blind. So it's going to be like a poker tournament playing 5-handed, right? This is essentially going to simulate when everyone folds to you and we have 40 big blind stacks with 50, 100, and 5 people are going to be putting in, well, let's do 3 people. So we'll be playing mostly 4-handed poker. 4 people will be putting in a 25 ante each, which makes a big blind ante. So essentially we are simulating now. Everyone folds to us in the cutoff. What do we do? And I want it to give us live advice in case it thinks we made a mistake so we can analyze it. We'll automatically rebuy if we get down to 90% of our starting stacks, so that essentially, again, we're simulating that exact scenario that I want to simulate. So here we are at the table, and we have 8-5 offsuit. As you see, 50, 100 blinds, 100 big blind ante. You can basically assume everyone folded before the action gets to you, and we're going to fold, move on to the next hand. Jack 3 suited, facing a raise and a 3-bet. We just fold, right? Nothing fancy. King 9 offsuit right here, I think we're probably going to want to be 3-betting with the intention of folding if we get jammed on. Opponent makes it 280. Oop, I think 1,000 is probably pretty nice. So let's do that. And the program actually enjoys calling. So notice here it says that calling is a little bit better than re-raising, which, you know, is fine. Certainly calling could be better. I don't doubt it. Maybe it's using slightly worse hands as a bluff. We'll actually take a look at some of these hands later to see what strategy PokerSnowie suggests. But, okay, it says call. We do re-raise, though. The opponent calls. Flop comes this. And now we have top pair, which is a pretty great hand. Do we want to check or bet? This is a board that should connect with our opponent decently well, so maybe we're supposed to just check raise all in. We could also just bet small with much of our range because we probably don't have a whole lot of bluffs, and some of our bluffs probably line up okay with this. So let's try betting small and see what happens. Let's do 750. And the right move is to bet pot. Oh, wait. Your move of betting 0.34 pot was okay, but the best move would have been to bet pot. All right, sure. We bet this size, opponent calls, turns an ace. This is clearly okay for my range, but bad for my hand. I think we're supposed to check because we have a very clear marginal made hand now. If the opponent bets, we're going to call it off. And now in the river, we have to decide if we want to bet or not. And I don't think there's a whole lot of value to be had here. I don't think we can make any better hands fold, like pocket 10s. We're probably not getting that to fold, although maybe. But right here, I think we really want to give our opponent every possible opportunity to bluff, so I think we need to check. We do check, opponent checks, and notice here if we were against pocket 5s, the opponent would have just folded if we bet, right? So it's going to be very hard to get money in the pot. All right, raise and 3-bet, so we fold. 10-9 suited in the small blind. We can either limp or raise. Let's try limping, but I really don't know what strategy PokerSnowie is going to recommend from the small blind. Kind of interesting, this opponent min-raised. I would not expect to be min-raised much at all because I'm just going to call with everything. I imagine this is probably just a lot of very strong hands, just pushing a lot of equity, so we'll be cautious, we'll call. It says it actually likes raising now. Wow. So you have to understand, it knows its strategy better than I do. If I was playing real world poker and I limped and then small blind or big blind min raised, I would assume the big blind's essentially saying, I'm going to give you, what, we have to put in 100 to win a pot that's going to be 500. I'm going to give you 4-to-1 pot odds. You only need to win 20, realize 20% equity, and you can't do it. Seems like they should have a pretty strong range. But all right, whatever. We're going to check this flop. Opponent's going to bet a lot. Now do we call or raise? This should be pretty good for that range I just presumed the opponent had, so I would do a whole lot of calling here, especially when the opponent doesn't bet so big. But I think calling's probably okay. Raising's obviously fine too, but this is a spot where it's really important to think about what makes up the opponent's range. And you have to think when the opponent raises small over the limp that it must just be a lot of good big cards. So how do good big cards connect with Queen Jack 4? Probably pretty good, right? So now what do we do? I think leading's actually a viable option here because we just lost a lot of our equity. That said, it's probably okay just to check fold. So I check opponent bets, and I think we're supposed to just fold now. And it says call or raise. Interesting. We went a tiny bit of equity doing those. So it's essentially taking this hand and using it as a bluff. The thing is, like, I don't know if we're getting the right odds just to straight call here because I think we have some pretty bad reverse implied odds. If we do get, let's say the king comes, right? It's pretty easy for the opponent to be betting ace jack or ace 10 or be betting with a hand like, a random flush draw that won't pay us if we do get there. So I'm not so sure about this. But that's what it does. We'll take a look at that one later too. Queen 8 suited, we can raise this hand. I raise it up. Big blind calls. This is a great flop. Probably supposed to be betting small here with everything, although maybe half pot's a little bit better. Given this somewhat, the 7 and the 5 connect pretty well with big blind calling range. Let's do half pot. It likes a small bet, which, I thought was fine. This is probably a spot you want to be betting small with pretty much everything. Let's take a look at the options. You see betting small is great. Betting bigger results in us not winning quite as much equity, so that makes sense that it's recommending this play. Opponent just folds. Okay. 7-6 suited, we can raise or fold, either one. We do raise, though. Flop comes. This is a board I imagine we're supposed to be betting less frequently on, but when we do bet, we want to be betting on the bigger side. So I think we're probably supposed to bet something like 600. And here we'd just be betting with our good top pairs and our good draws. We could also use a smaller size with all the other more marginal stuff. Maybe half pot's still fine. Let's just do half pot. So it likes even smaller bet. All right, it's kind of interesting. Okay. Opponent just folds. As you see, though, it helps you understand what sizings you need to be using across the board. And that kind of thing is very relevant. Because imagine you just always bet half pot blindly. And you never really think, should I be betting smaller? Should I be betting bigger? Well, that kind of thing is very, very relevant. And if you're always using the wrong size, even if you are betting or checking 100% of the time correctly, if you're using the wrong size every time, you're definitely leaving a lot of money on the table. All right, we defend this hand pre-flop. Opponent checks. This should probably be a lot of marginal stuff, I imagine, so I think we should probably check, but betting queen can be fine. Maybe we should just go ahead and bet. This is one of these spots where I'm not sure what the program will recommend, given, I know the opponent should connect pretty well with this, so it shouldn't be doing a whole lot of check folding. So are we setting up a triple barrel bluff or not? Let's do it. Why not? So, half pot bet would have been checking or betting some portion of the time. So we did go for the bet. Oh, I see. So look right here. Notice if we bet small, we can bet more often, right? You're going to find that whenever you're using a small bet size compared to a big bet size, you just get to bet more often. And as you see, the difference between betting and checking is pretty negligible across the board. So we do bet, we get min raise. Yeah, thanks, right? Let's call, try to get there. Opponent bets turn. I think we're supposed to fold now because we could just be dead again. All right, king 7 in small blind. We can limp or raise. Let's try limping again. It likes raising a lot though. So a lot of the time the best hands to raise are the ones that play kind of poorly post flop, like king 7 offsuit does. I have really not practiced a ton against good GTO bots from the small blind, but I know against real world players you have to be quite cautious raising a lot because they will just punish you because they're in position and they're going to play decently well post flop. But that's okay. We limp opponent min raises again. This is a very odd strategy. I'm not too sure. Well, we'll have to look into this further. Not in this video, but maybe in the future. If you want to check this out, again, go to PokerSnowie.com/John, or no, go to JonathanLittlePoker.com/PokerSnowie, and you can delve into this as well. Wow, it thinks folding is okay. I'm never folding here. Yes, our hand's not great. We're not going to realize our equity well, but we certainly are going to get 20% equity realization out of this pot. As you see, though, things calling and raising are all like basically neutral, so it doesn't matter so much. One thing you should definitely pay attention to when you are using solvers or AI programs is that if they are giving you analysis, right, like PokerSnowie does, realize that like right there, you're making a 0.02 error compared to a even scenario, it's like nothing, right? You really want to make sure you're not making any egregious blunders. Like pre-flop, it's saying I really should raise. So, okay, good to know. Maybe this is a lead. I don't know. Lead could be fine. Let's go ahead and raise with the king high and the gut shot. Seems like the obvious play to me. As you see, this might just be a tendency that I naturally have, where you take whatever draws you have and raise them. Notice it likes raising sometimes. If we had queen high, I'm sure it would like to raise more often, because queen high wins less than king high. But I am a pretty big fan of raising in spots like that, especially against real world opponents who will raise pre-flop too often, bet the flop too often, but then play really straightforwardly if you apply aggression to them. I definitely like applying aggression in those spots. All right, raise call. We're just going to fold here. Queen 7's probably going to flop poorly, so we are just going to fold. Looks like the program messed up. There were no blinds, but I know they were there. Queen 8 offsuit on the button. We could raise or fold. Let's actually try raising and see what it says. I would not be surprised if it said folding was fine, though. All right, check on the flop. This is pretty good for the big blind. It's actually not so good for the small blind, because the small blind should have a lot of big cards. But we just have no equity here, so I'm just going to check and give up. It's too likely someone has something. Now, do we bet the turn? Well, which hands are best to be betting the turn? That's going to be clearly a 5. I could obviously have a lot of 5s, right? Given I raise pre-flop, but then check behind on the flop, as I would with my marginal hands. So we can have some bluffs here. Which bluff should we have? Probably 8-7 and 8-6 suited, but I would bet those on the flop a lot of the time, right? So we have to look for other hands to bluff. That's going to be like 10 high, jack high, maybe queen high. What I'm saying is I think this might actually be close to a bluff. I don't think it is, but let's just try and see what happens. This bet size is probably fine. And notice it says here, if we're going to bet small, it likes betting small a decent amount. But if the options are bet half pot or checking, then it likes checking. And you're going to find that very often this is the case. It does prefer smaller bet sizes in general. I'm always a little bit hesitant in the real world to use tiny bet sizes in spots like this, because I think this program may fold out like ace high if I bet small, but I don't think real world opponents are folding ace high. So it's always important to actually analyze how real world opponents play too. But if you do find yourself playing against really tough opponents, this type of analysis definitely holds true. Anyway, betting get called. We river top pair. That's probably good now. So now we want to value bet. We're trying to get called by a 9 or pocket 8s or ace high, so we should probably go medium or small. We definitely have a lot of bluffs available. So let's see if we can ever make an overbet. Can we go 2x pot? I think that would be a little bit greedy. So let's just try this bet size. So with half pot betted either, it would usually just bets half pot. Oh wait, I'm sorry, that's not right. Notice here the EVs are like roughly the same, so it doesn't really matter. But notice it is betting big. Whenever it does recommend one size over another and the EVs are roughly the same, that's usually just because it's developed a way to protect the rest of your range. And you're going to find that sometimes it may make the most sense to play a specific hand in a specific way, but it may take value away from all of your other hands, which makes your range and strategy harder to implement. So anyway, it recommends betting as we do. We bet, opponent calls, and we win. All right, I'm going to stop now, and we're going to take a look at a few of those hands that I played that I thought were particularly interesting. All right, so what we do now is we close this window, and it says, do you really want to quit? Yes, we do. Within a few minutes, your session will appear in the Import Manager for further analysis. Let's go do some further analysis. All right, so we go to Import, click on the most recent session. Here it is right here. Click View Analysis, and it brings up our analysis. Shows our error rate, shows how many big mistakes we made. Profit's kind of irrelevant. And now you can click on Moves, which is everything you did, Errors, which are mistakes you made, and Showdowns. So let's just take a look at the errors, because I think a few of those were worth taking a look at. So right here, this is the hand we had where button raised, and I had king 9 offsuit. And it says we should be calling. You can actually go over here and click on, what do I click on here? I click on range advice, and it shows what we need to be doing with all of our hands. So it's recommending a big bet size, but it's recommending raising with, if you take a look at this, it's just mostly good hands, right? Just a straight linear range. Not quite including king 9. You see king 10 raises sometimes. Not very often, but sometimes. But that's about it, right? It's also raising the good suited hands. And then the calling range from the small blind, interestingly enough, is the small pairs. Stuff like decent ace highs that are perhaps not good enough to 3-bet. Interesting, like ace 9 and ace 8 are flatting some portion of the time. And stuff like that. Okay, neat. Okay, so then what we do is we can click next here. Oops, I clicked on the wrong thing. All right, this is error number 1. There we go. Error number 2. While calling is better than folding, this is a perfect hand for a bluff raise. In case your opponent calls, you can still flop a flush. So this is a spot where I limp small blind, which if we go over here, we can click on Preflop Advice, and it'll show us what we should be limping with and raising with. As you see, it's a pretty complicated strategy. You see 10-9 suited here. It limps. It raises most of the time, limps only 9% of the time. So it is raising this hand the majority of the time. And it's raising all these hands in the middle, limping some hands at the top, and raising some hands at the top. Really a very, very difficult to implement mixed strategy. And, okay, worth mentioning. But anyway, this is a spot where it says I should limp raise. Then we go on to the turn. I check called flop bet, check the turn, opponent bets. And now, in this scenario, it recommends calling. And I thought this was a little bit interesting. Notice it does show our hand is like pretty weak here. It's probably just saying essentially that we are getting roughly the right odds to stick around. Let's take a look at the other bet sizes if they are options. You see it just likes call across the board. All right, maybe it's a little bit nitty by me. I mean, I would like to be... There's actually a way for you to go through and enter this in the scenario. Like you can set up your own scenario where you can show how you would play the river. And I'm wondering if it's going to be doing a lot of leading on the river, which maybe that is what it's doing. Here, say we had the wrong move, we elected to raise, but notice here just checking and betting or I'm sorry, our opponent checked this flop after, what did they do? They raised small blind minimum, I called, it checked flop, I bet. As you see, check and bet are roughly the same. If you bet small though, prefers betting a little bit more. Also, again, a very big takeaway you will find from this is that betting big is very often just not a good strategy, especially when stacks are shallow. So you definitely want to shy away from that. Here, we have King 7 offsuit. Let's go here and look at range advice again. Oh, that's not what I wanted. I wanted preflop advice. Here, King 7 offsuit is basically always a raise, right? 100%. So it's interesting that it's raising all of these hands that are essentially good blocker hands that are decent. And that does make sense, right? When you raise these hands, you don't really care if your opponent folds. And if you limp, you don't really want to face a raise. So it's using these hands as raises with the intention of folding if you get 3-bet, which makes logical sense. So that's going to be it for today. If you enjoyed this program, if you enjoyed this video, go download the program yourself. Go to jonathanlittlepoker.com/PokerSnowie. There'll be a link right below this video where you can test yourself and see what mistakes you are making. And again, a lot of these decisions will be relatively close. And on the relatively close decisions, don't beat yourself up too much. But you will find that if you are making egregious errors, especially if you're making egregious errors on the regular basis, you're probably just not playing very well. And you're going to find that if you play a little bit loose, it's not going to like your plays all that much. And that's because they're often not good if your opponents play well. So, again, check that out at jonathanlittlepoker.com/PokerSnowie. Good luck in your games, have fun, and I'll talk to you next time.